Still sitting in a truck seat that's older than your favorite pair of work boots? Your back has been filing complaints for years. If your seat is worn out, sagging, or just plain uncomfortable, it's time for an upgrade. Head on over to seatspecialist.com. Check out their selection of quality replacement seats built to keep you comfortable mile after mile. And don't forget to use promo code TR10 4U to save 10% on your order. Seatspecialist.com, because a better ride starts with a better seat.
Welcome back to another episode of That's Delivered. I'm your host, Trucking Ray, and today we have a very special guest joining us. She's been around the industry for quite some time, so if you've been around, you've probably heard of her name. She's a powerhouse in logistics, a champion for women in trucking, and a leader who truly understands the heart of transportation. I'm talking about no one else other than Mari Roberts, a Senior Vice President and Service and Distribution, Supply and Commercialization at PepsiCo. I first came across Mari in LinkedIn and saw that PepsiCo is a strong supporter, like with TAT, Truckers Against Trafficking, and an incredible organization that I've personally supported and also had on this very podcast. Seeing the companies like PepsiCo, such industry professionals, and make this mission of making a difference in the industry has definitely been a game changer. And on top of that, Mari has also been a key figure in supporting women in trucking. And under her leadership, Frito-Lay and PepsiCo were recognized as a top company for women to work for in transportation. Mari's leadership spans across massive teams, critical supply chains operations, and initiatives to help drive diversity and advocacy in trucking. But what really intrigues me is the road to recognition. What were the challenges, defining moments, and the lessons she's learned along the way? That's what we're going to dive into. So grab a cup of coffee, settle in, and we're going to get into it. Mari, how are you doing? Thank you so much
for joining us on the show. Excellent. Yeah. How are you?
I'm doing well. Thank you. Yeah, so we got great weather over here in Minnesota, so I'm smiling all the way. I'll take that.
I wish we could say the same here in Texas. We've got a little bit of a cold front, so you never know, I guess, what to expect. The weather here.
Yeah, so I just want to, tell people about yourself, get people to know you and all the great things that you're doing over there at PepsiCo.
Yeah, no, thank you so much for having us, and I appreciate the intro. I was like, wow, that's such a, it's an honor, and just excited, and, congratulations to you. This is a really great, format, and I love, obviously, as you kind of hear my background, I'm just a huge advocate of drivers in general. So for you to be able to find this way to connect with all of the drivers on the road, I think it's just incredible. So I have been with PepsiCo, specifically PepsiCo Foods North America, specifically Frito-Lay, coming up on 25 years, which is hard for me to say out loud. Like, it's hard. Time flies, when you're having fun. And I think anybody that's in the transportation business knows that, once it gets in your blood, you have it in your blood. So I spent the first 24 of those 25 years all in transportation, and just absolutely fell in love with it. I studied supply chain management in Arizona State. So shout out to all the Sun Devils out there. And always just loved and gravitated to the logistics and distribution side of the business. And so when I first started, with Frito-Lay right out of college, I had a role in transportation where I got to work, directly with the drivers. And that's where I really for anybody in this industry, it's very dynamic. It's fast paced. There's never a dull moment. I always ask people, do you like doing jigsaw puzzles? Because if you do, you're going to love what we do for a living. And every day you got to put the pieces back together, and they all impact each other. And so when you combine the business element and then just the people element with the drivers, I was like, oh yeah, this is for me. So I spent the first 7 years at our Casa Grande facility out in Arizona, and loved, just the time. I always say that's, I learned so much from the drivers. I learned everything I know about, the industry from them, and doing ride-alongs and seeing the world from their perspective, and just realized they needed an advocate. They needed somebody that had their back when they were out on the road. And I just, for me, that was just something that was so important. I knew if I took care of the little things, they would take care of the big things. And I still keep in touch with most of the drivers there. I still have the same cell phone number. So yeah, they know how to reach me. And then from there, spent a lot of different roles, kind of more like corporate type support roles in transportation. And then I moved to Texas in 2010 and had a bunch of different roles in transportation. We, leading all of our optimization, our technology. So I really geek out when it comes to like spreadsheets and data and queries and all that stuff. And I really enjoyed that side of the business as well. But we built some really cool technology tools just to help streamline communication with the driver or just remove obstacles and what we could go develop to make the driver's day-to-day, easy. And I know you probably experience this. I always tell people like the hardest part is just getting the driver off the lot, right? Like getting the load done, the equipment ready. Like that's the hardest thing we do. Once the driver gets on the road, that's usually when they take care of everything else. And so then from there, I went back out into kind of a more field operations role here in Dallas and supported 2 different terminals and warehouses here in Dallas and Irving. So again, kind of got retrained by the drivers in those roles, and just to make sure I was kind of still grounded. And it's hard when you can work in kind of the corporate world, right? You got to still stay plugged into what's really happening, out in our field teams that are making, moving, and selling our product. And then we had a little bit of an org structure in 2018, and I had the opportunity to stand up what we would refer to as kind of a vertical transportation organization where all of the field terminals reported kind of into one central team with our headquarters team. And it was just a really great, experience. And I'm so proud. I could brag all day about just the amazing team, the team of leaders, the team of drivers that we have, and what we've been able to do to continue to add value back to Frito-Lay and to continue to move the organization forward. So I was very blessed that PepsiCo and Frito-Lay let me keep playing with trucks, just got to keep expanding my role and picked up all third-party transportation, all inbound transportation. And in the role I have now, basically support all of the move side of the business. So anything from, our asset strategy, just longer term, to all of our product supply, planning, space, commercialization, warehousing, distribution, and then of course, transportation and fleet, which has always been kind of the heart at what I've been doing.
Wow. I mean, think about that journey that you've been on and the things you've been able to get involved with. If you were someone that first started out, if you were to speak to your younger self, what was your education path, the experiences that you had that prepared you for where you're at today?
That's a great question. I don't know that anything, that you're going to learn in a book or from college is ever going to prepare you. But I think, for me, it was, as I look back at what really set me up was being a good listener. Honestly, one of my favorite quotes, and I wish I had said it, but was people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. And I think as I look back to my younger self, that was probably where I spent most of my time, was just spending individual time with the drivers, getting to know them as people and really understanding how could I help them. And I remember when I first started, and I mentioned I did a lot of ride-alongs, and it was interesting how many drivers commented that I was the only manager that ever wrote anything down. And that really struck me for 2 reasons, because one, it was meaningful, or it meant to them, it validated that like I was listening, I heard you, and that I cared enough to just take notes and write things down. So then when I went and followed up on things, I could follow back up. And it sounds very simple, but in hindsight, I think we underestimate that. I think we underestimate the importance and the value. And a lot of times I think people are afraid to have tough conversations. But what I learned very early on was the drivers just wanted an answer. They didn't, they were more interested in the follow-up and the answer, like than it was a yes or no, or, whether it was favorable or unfavorable. They just wanted to know. And I think if I was to look back to my younger self, I would say, like, just to validate that piece of it was just the act of, showing how much I cared. They genuinely understood my intent. So as, we had to make hard decisions, or there's decisions people don't like, they at least could respect, and they understood where I was coming from.
Wow, that's huge. I mean, man, was there a defining moment that made you realize that, this was the right industry for you and it matches your personality? I mean, you're fitting right in. Like, touching on the listening part, I mean, that is huge. That is a great gift to give
Yeah.
back to someone. But
You
what
know,
moment that you can recall or reflect on?
that is, I hadn't thought about that at one moment, because I think it was a series of a lot of moments, but kind of a few that jump out, and I'll kind of maybe start very early on, and maybe my mindset. So I'll go way back, way back. So I'm from a really small town in Southeast Arizona, right? You'd call it a truck stop town, and so we spend a lot of time on I-10. And, back in the day, seatbelts were probably non-required, so probably standing up in the front seat, the middle of a truck, which is probably not great. But I used to, my dad would flash his lights at the truck drivers. And so I would always ask him, like, why do you do that? And so my dad would explain that, it just makes it easier for the drivers to know that they've passed and they've cleared and that it's safe to move over. And, you think, oh, okay, well, that's neat. And obviously I was a, pretty inquisitive child. So then you would see, I would see all of the mud flaps and the bumper stickers that said, without trucks, America stops. Right. So as I'm like, I used to think that was very literal, like, but it really is literal. So again, I would ask my dad, like, what does that mean? Like, why do all these trucks have those, first I had to ask what the things were, like, why do they have those things behind the tires? And so he would explain, what mud flaps were for and why they had that and how important trucking and truck drivers were to everything that you buy. Majority of, the food you eat and the services and your clothes and, your school supplies and your backpack, all of that got to where you bought it, from a truck. And now that I've been in this industry and I know that it's over 70%, right? 70% of all goods in the US move by truck. Like that, I always thought was such an impactful part. And so my dad, would just tell me like how critical, truck drivers were. And he told me like they had to have a special license and not everybody can just drive a truck. So I grew up thinking truck drivers were like superheroes, right? Like you had to have a special license and not anybody could do it and how hard the job was, but how important and how critical it was. So I think from a very young age, I had this like utmost respect and admiration for truck drivers and then the industry. So for me, to answer your question, when I got into it, I came into it with that mindset of like, I got to be part of something really, really cool that was so important to society, to our economy, to America. And then, you flash forward through COVID. And to me, that's when it was great to see that I think society recognized how critical truck drivers were, just day to day that, most people may not even think about, how their toilet paper got to the store that you bought or, whatever. And so I think that for me was, even though very late into my career, was definitely a defining moment where it validated like, yes, this is exactly where, I want to be. This is what I'm passionate about. And being able, to continue to just to help, elevate the perception and the role that drivers have.
That's huge. I mean, speaking of COVID, I mean, that was a turning point for a lot of people. I mean, it was a tough transition. Was there any moments there that was, that you can recall or reflect back on that was a defining moment for you as well?
Honestly, I remember it vividly. It was a Friday. My kids had actually just, they were about to go on spring break and basically just never went back. But I remember when the FMCSA published where, the exemptions of, right, just in this. And I remember we pulled our leadership team together and I said, we're not doing it. Even though legally we would have been allowed to extend hours of service, it was like, we're not going to do it. Like, and so that for me, I remember being very like a critical, defining moment. But I also remember when I had my leadership team together, none of us knew what we were about to head into. But I kind of just said, I said, I think we need to be prepared for a marathon and not a sprint. And in hindsight, like, I don't think any of us expected it to be as long as it was, but I'm just glad that at that moment, I was kind of mentally prepared for, this is going to be bigger than what we may know of it as today. And from there, it was just, it just probably, as normal days in trucking are crazy, but that just escalated it. And then when you work in a food, obviously, right, like our product was flying off the shelves. We couldn't keep up with the demand because, people were staying home. So the grocery shelves, and most people maybe didn't realize this at the time, but like our go-to-market system and our DSD, our sales team, they're in the grocery stores every day replenishing, so every day was like, the Frito-Lay shelves were wiped out. And it's like, well, we'll be back tomorrow, right, to refill them. And so it was just amazing to see how, we came together, and like we always do, right, you find a way.
Yeah, I mean, those challenging moments, navigating through those, definitely see what you're made of. It definitely does change things from the optics, seeing how it all plays out.
Can I tell you another really cool story about COVID too, which I thought was also really good? What kind of leads up into like the industry connection, and just, if I had to go back to your previous question on a defining moment, was in 2009. I'd been in the industry for 9 years, and I thought I knew a lot about Frito-Lay or transportation, but what I realized is I knew a lot about Frito-Lay transportation. And that in 2009 is when I got really involved with the National Private Truck Council, where you got exposed to all these other private fleets that, it was such an amazing feeling to be in the room or in environments, conversations with people who do what you do for a living, but just they're hauling tires or they're hauling, other commodities. And so that was also another defining moment for me where I realized like, this is a really, really cool industry, even outside of Frito-Lay and what I knew. So kind of like taking now years of just industry connections and making friends along the way. When COVID hit and it was this immediate, bars, restaurants, movie theaters, everything was closing. But yet in my world, it was grocery stores, club chains, right? Like all of that volume was just skyrocketing. And it was really cool within our private fleet community. So I called Monday morning. I started making some calls to some of my friends that were at pretty big food service companies, right? Like food service companies that are servicing the bars and the restaurants and the movie theaters that were going to be closed. And I'm like, hey, here's a thought. I'm going to need some additional capacity and some additional drivers. Their business basically just evaporated overnight. And so I would tell you within 3 days, which is a miracle in corporate America to have contracts and things assigned, but we started some pretty cool partnerships with some of the food service drivers. And it brought the human element back, because those drivers otherwise would have been furloughed or laid off or out of work. But they came across, and it was, kind of a similar, like they were doing multi-stop unloads to bars and restaurants. And I'm like, we need to just do multi-stop, deliveries to these grocery chains. So I think it was just a match made in heaven. And I knew I'm not saying any of the names because we weren't the only ones. And, as I talked to my friends at, Albertson, Safeway, they were partnering with, some of the pizza companies. And it was just neat to see how our industry came together and really helped keep all of the drivers and their families, just whole during that time.
Yeah. Keep putting food on the table. And
that's right.
Man, it made a big difference for a lot of people.
Yeah.
There's probably been some failures, and maybe we can touch on those because, everything isn't always peaches and cream, right? The industry can be unpredictable and challenging. Was there a moment where you thought maybe, hey, this is not for me, maybe do something else?
Honestly, if COVID didn't kill me, then I don't think anything would. But, in hindsight, we kind of look at, for us, you had COVID, and then you probably being where you are geographically is, snow and ice is probably not a big deal for you. But remember, we had that just massive, we called it Snowmageddon, where we had so many of our facilities that were just iced, like they were iced in. And then we actually had some other disruption, from from a strike in the middle of the country. And so it was just like back to back, just, headwinds on, okay, what's next, right? Like there's nothing else you can throw at us that my team and I aren't going to figure it out. So, yes, to your point, not everything is peaches and, rainbows and unicorns. But I think the bigger thing is just knowing that you'll persevere and you'll figure it out, right? Like that's what I think about in terms of just being agile. For me, I think I'm one of those I'm very passionate about this industry, but when it comes to like those types of things, it doesn't really rattle me. Like I'm like, okay, here's what we got. We got fires, we got hurricanes, we got floods, we got tornadoes, we have this. And it's just like, boom, here's what we're going to go do. Here's what we need. And we kind of just start dividing and conquering. And that to me, like there's probably 1,000 things that most people may call failures, but to me, those are all just learning opportunities. And it's like, okay, we tried that. That didn't work. Let's try something else. Or, and you kind of have to just go through a little trial and error sometimes and be open enough and be humble enough and be secure enough to just say, okay, that's okay. Like that didn't work. We just move on. And I think that's the biggest thing in any industry, but especially in transportation and supply chain is you just got to be resilient. You got to figure it out. I grew up playing sports. And so I think there's a lot of parallels to, learning how to lose and learning how, to accept challenges and setbacks, that it doesn't break you and it doesn't stop you. It just makes you stronger. And it just makes you think about, okay, what do I need to do differently next time? Or how can I continue to train and prepare my team? And I've had the opportunity to coach as well. I coached my son's baseball team and, trying to tell 10 and 11-year-old boys, right? It's difficult, but I think those are just great life lessons that prepare you for these types of situations.
Man, you're the real deal. I would love to be on your team.
Right. I appreciate that. I'm trying. And I think, to me, that's always been one of the biggest compliments is, there's people always wanted to come work on our team because they could see, again, we had a strategy. We knew where we were going. We were getting really good, results but from the people aspect, it's like, I think people could see we were doing a lot of really good things. And hopefully you've seen like, I try to be very visible. And one of the other learnings that I've had over the years is I don't necessarily like to be in the forefront of things. I'm kind of more of like, I like to be kind of the behind the scenes cheerleader, but I've also recognized that I have a big responsibility to represent my team. So doing things like this, and, I appreciate the visibility because the visibility just brings, visibility to my amazing team and all of the amazing Frito-Lay drivers that are out there that are, keeping our supply chain moving. I represent them. And that's a huge honor for me. So when I get to post our Million Miler celebrations, and as a matter of fact, we have this year's coming up next year where we're going to recognize 86 million milers, 1 million, 2 million, and 3 million milers, whether it's our rodeos or, some of the things we're doing with Truckers Against Trafficking. I think it's just a great opportunity for me to just showcase the work that the team is doing.
That's awesome. That's amazing. That's great leadership. I mean, that's a massive organization that you get to be a part of. I mean, your team, I think it's about over 3,000 employees overseeing these critical services. There's also safety and supply chain performers. I think it's like 28 traffic centers is what I was reading. Make sure it's right.
We're actually up to 42. We're actually up to 42 because as part of our strategic, strategy, we've been adding capacity. We've been adding capacity across the U.S. and, just making sure that we are able to distribute all of our product, into the market in a more cost efficient way. So it's been a great avenue of growth. We've increased our driver headcount over the last few years by, 500 drivers. We've added 500 drivers, so it's a really good growth strategy.
That's awesome. Well, what is the key to managing such a large operation and keeping things running smoothly? What would you tell someone, some advice on that?
Yeah. I think the biggest thing, we talk a lot about dividing and conquering, but empowering, like we have to rely on all 3,000 people on the team, right? Like, and that was, again, one of the things very early on, when I first started, as a manager, all of the drivers made more money than me. And I shouldn't say made, they earned more. The drivers earned more money than I did. And so I think starting from kind of the ground up, you realize, and I realized at the time, like their jobs were more important than mine. Like, let's be real. And so I loved kind of just thinking of that. And even in the role that I'm in now, I tell the drivers all the time, they're more valuable to the organization. If I left the organization tomorrow, Frito-Lay or PepsiCo is going to continue to make, move, and sell product with or without me, right? They could replace me tomorrow, but a driver, think about how much more difficult it is to replace a driver. So I think when you kind of stay grounded in that mindset of how do you align an organization, setting the tone from a leadership standpoint on what our roles are. We used to call our manager roles or supervisor roles resources. Because so when I started, I was a resource, and that it was a driver resource. And so when you have that mindset of my job is to remove obstacles as a resource for the drivers so they are able to go do their job safely and efficiently every day, that's the mindset. So I think when you've got the leadership team, which I have amazing leaders, that a lot of us have grown up in this industry, and I think come to, appreciate what the drivers do, but also we've built capability and trust that, the drivers know where we're heading, then it makes it a lot easier when you have to make very difficult decisions. Cause again, we understand where we're heading. So if there's tough years, but again, I think as long as you stay grounded to what that truly is, that's the only way to do it. The other thing that I'll kind of add to that was an interesting experience that I think helped shape me was one of the drivers when I first started out of college. His daughter and I played softball together in college. And so a lot of times when, for me coming right out of college, I was obviously pretty young, and I looked at a lot of these drivers like they could be my dad because one of my friend's dad was one of the drivers, or they could be my older brothers. I have 2 older brothers, which for whatever reason, a lot of people can tell about me that I have older brothers. I don't know why or what that is about it, but I do. But I looked at these drivers like, they could be my dad. It could be my older brothers, could be your uncle. And so I treated them like that. Like I treated them like they were my own dad or my own brother or my own uncle when it came to having difficult conversations. And they knew I was coming at any of the coaching or feedback from a place of love and caring concern. And I think sometimes that's also where, especially young managers can go wrong, kind of trying to prove themselves. So it's like, we're all adults, we're all humans, right? It's just like, how do you have, respectful conversations in the lens of like, we just want to be better. I want you to be better. I want you to go home safely to your family.
Wow. That is huge. I mean, making those connections, staying connected with employees on every level. I mean, that is a big deal. I mean, what do you think is the biggest misconception people have about leadership in transportation?
I think the biggest misconception about leadership is that leaders just sit in their offices all day and they really don't know what's going on. But I think a lot of the leaders, they do spend the time. And as a matter of fact, like I'm also very passionate about, we have objectives every year, right? Goals and objectives. I have always asked and required, you could call it as an objective or an expectation that all of our leaders do at least 2 ride-alongs a year, right? No matter how long you've been in this business, how long you've been in this industry, to take the time to just get out of the office, go spend the day in the truck, go see the world from the driver's lens. You'll learn so much. And so I think that was an area where, we kind of put our money where our mouth is on. We wanted to make sure that was visible. So it's like the drivers actually knew like this was a priority of ours as leaders or as management to be able to go do that. And so I think like you can try to get under some of those misconceptions, because most of us don't drive a truck, right? I don't have a CDL. After all these years in the industry, a lot of people think that I have a CDL. I don't have a CDL. They've made me get behind the wheel in a couple of our rodeos before. And fortunately, I've had some really good trainers and coaches that were telling me what to do, but I don't have a CDL. So there's a lot of things that I don't know, but there's some things that I can help bridge the, like, just different perspective, right? I can offer, did you think about this, or had you thought about, from this vantage point?
Yeah. So you think about that on that advantage that you have to be able to, you got to feel them behind the wheel. But yeah, think about weather, supply chain disruptions. There's a lot of other things too. Even drivers don't know. What's one of the toughest situations that you've had to navigate as a leader, and how did you or your team tackle it?
That's a great question. I'll try not to use, it's hard. Like I was like, of course, the first one, that always pops to mind, I think is COVID, because it was the unknown, right? There was no playbook. There was no strategy for, how we needed to continue to operate. And so that, I would tell you, like, the biggest thing the leadership team and I did is we connected every other day. And so what that really helped us figure out was we were getting real-time feedback from the drivers. So you think about like how quickly everything was moving and changing. It gave us the ability as a leadership team from, every other day, like our drivers could relay information to dispatchers too, all of it. Like it was impacting everybody, drivers, dispatchers, mechanics. They could, bring some of the questions or the concerns they had or ideas to their leaders. And then when our leadership team, we would be able to pull that together from across the country and share best practices. So we were able to move very quickly as an entire organization, because we were so well wired and so well connected in terms of like, okay, here's what the drivers need. Let's, take point on who's going to go work with HR, who's going to go work with the safety team, who's going to go do all this. And it was like, we had a very quick and seamless, like probably up and downstream communication, which I think was 99% of it was just the communication on how important it was to keep everybody aware of what was happening, how quickly things were moving. And so from there, I would tell you, like, that was a big takeaway was, okay, that worked. So even though you don't have a playbook for a global pandemic, now you can probably replicate that same playbook in terms of the communication venues and how tightly we are going to stay connected to share best practices and just help provide that the venue up and downstream. I think is something that like now we've applied to multiple other, issues or challenges that we've come across.
The more you do something, the better it gets. I mean, that's like a good leadership philosophy. Like you mentioned, a playbook.
Yeah. So again, you don't know. And I think that's, you expect the unexpected, right? Mm-hmm. Yeah. You kind of have to just expect something to not go right. And then you just kind of draw back to like, okay, here's what. Yeah.
Awesome. I mean, and you get to take that with you for future challenges that come up, and also share it with others.
Okay. Sorry. There was a little bit of a lag in the.
Uh-oh. Yeah.
Okay, there you are. Okay, it cut back up. Sorry, you'll have to cut that part out.
Yeah, no, it's the connection can always be surprising sometimes. That's okay.
But again, it's what we do, right? It's just a Monday in transportation.
So also championing women and trucking. So PepsiCo is really taking the lead in this, recognizing it as a top company for women in transportation. What initiatives have you or your team put in place to create a workplace for women to thrive?
Yeah, that's a great question. And it's really cool to say that like we have tripled the number of female drivers that we have in our ranks, and also technicians, which is also, probably an area underrepresented by women today. But as you think about like just the mechanic space, like it's not the same diesel, mechanic, right? That may have been in the industry 20, 30, 40 years ago. So we've also, seen a significant increase in our female technicians, but it was, very subtly, we started, putting just featuring female drivers in some of our campaigns, in our advertising, in our driver recruitment videos. And I think just being able to see a woman do the job, it then opened the door. And I will tell you, there were a lot of men who were like, oh, well, they can do it, I can do it. So it worked on both sides, honestly. I think it was a really good way just to showcase some of the women that we have, that these are tough jobs. All these jobs are tough. We do a lot of unloading, and like you can do the job. And so that, I think, was a very good way for us to start showcasing that the job is open. You can do the job just like anybody else. And I honestly, like, for me, this was maybe something that I had to learn over the years growing up in the industry. There weren't a lot of women. Like, we kind of joke that, you go to a industry conference or even an internal meeting, and there were never lines in the women's restroom, right? Like, I never had to wait in line because it's primarily a male populated industry. And I say populated and not dominated for very intentionally, because I don't think any of the men in the industry are trying to dominate the women. And I think that's a negative connotation, right? I don't think men want to be dominating. There's just more of them. So it's a more male populated industry. I think those are two very different things. So growing up, I was not one of the people that had to see somebody that looked like me to think I could do that. But I have learned over the years that it is important to people. It is important to people to see somebody that they can relate to and that looks like them, to even plant the seed of like, you know what, I never thought about that. Maybe I can do that. And so I think over the years, that has also been a shift in my mentality of like, oh, okay, I am a woman. I probably need to make sure that like I'm setting a good example for all the young women who are coming up and looking up in the organization and saying, I want to do that one day. I want to have a job where people want to do my job, not people that are like, there's no way I'd ever want to do that job, or, it can't have a family, or, I'm very passionate about being a mom. I love my job. I love this company. I love my team, but I love being a mom the most, right? Being a mom is the most rewarding and fulfilling part of my whole life. And I want to make sure people know that it's not only okay, but like you can thrive. Like nothing gets me, fired up more than hearing a narrative that women have to choose between having a career and being a mom. And so I double down on that and talk a lot about how even becoming a mom has made me a better leader. So I think like those, as we think about women in trucking and just increasing the visibility to you can do anything you want to do. And so I think that that's also very important. And it translates across multiple cohorts, right? It's not just women. I think in general, I've learned that, unintentionally, I may have left my straight white male colleagues and leaders behind because they weren't getting exposed to some of the challenges that other cohorts were going through. And they were just naive to the fact that there were all these other issues. So I think that's also been another kind of critical point for me as a leader, specific to women, but just in general when it comes to, inclusion.
When you think about the men involved, also they could be an ally to play a supporting role for women.
That's right.
Have you also seen any of these barriers get broken down, or in the present day, what have you observed that has been gotten better over time?
It's a good question because I don't know. And it's funny, over the years, people have always asked me this, like, what barriers have I ever encountered for being a woman in the industry? And I've told them none. I've had barriers because I was new, because I didn't know something, but nothing that I would ever tell people was as a result of me being a woman in this industry. No barriers. I do think anything that we as an industry have done to improve safety, security, that impacts all drivers. And those are the things that I think are great, right? Like we're not just trying to make things safer for female drivers at truck stops or, rest areas on the road. No, those things are going to help make all drivers safer. And I think that's a better way to look at it. And I know you've talked about being a girl dad, and I love that because I think, when you are it makes you think differently about being an ally, and you want to help support, or you think about, and I think about my kids, like what kind of work environment do I want my children to work in? And am I setting a good example, and would I want them to face, some of the challenges? I'm not saying it's easy, but I also think for me, it's all about your mindset, right? If you go into it thinking that you're marginalized or thinking that you're a victim, then you're going to be. But if you don't, I've never run into any situation where I felt like that was a hindrance. If anything, I would tell you, I probably had an advantage if I was really being honest, because I think drivers are very different, and they were very different for me because I was a little bit more like mom, right? Like I'm a little bit more of a safe space. I'm going to be compassionate. I'm going to be empathetic. I'm going to give you a big hug, and I'm going to love you no matter what. But if you messed up and you did something wrong, we're going to have that conversation, right? Like your moms are sometimes the ones that hold you accountable. And I think that's the relationship I always had with the drivers, and they would open up and they would tell me everything. They didn't necessarily have that same relationship with some of the male managers. So again, I viewed that as an advantage that I had because I was able to connect with the drivers on a different level. I mean, they would come in and like, look at my hernia. Like, no, thanks. I really don't want to see that today. But that's just the kind of like, you get that comfort level when you have, more of that, like, more of a relationship, more like a mom than you do. And that's what I would tell you today. I think the drivers know that I love them no matter what. And, it's unconditional. It's unconditional love, and I have their back. But sometimes having their back is going to be tough love.
Oh yeah, we got to make tough decisions. It is a business, and then you do want to be able to provide. I mean, some things that trying to get that product out there can be a lot of heartache and pain. So yeah, I mean, looking into the future of things, things can change real quickly. So no, that's good. Thanks for doing that. I mean, that's huge. Wanted to touch on Truckers Against Trafficking and PepsiCo's social impact on that. One thing that stood out to me was how PepsiCo support Truckers Against Trafficking, the TATs. What led the company to get involved with TAT? Do you know if there was a particular story that goes along with that as how they got impacted by helping drivers be more aware of these situations and that organization to help out?
Yeah. And thank you for bringing it up. And I appreciate your support with that organization. Truckers Against Trafficking is doing a lot of amazing work. So I will tell you what was really fun for me. So I listened to the episode where you had one of the founders, of TAT on your show. I actually met her sister, or one of the sisters, right? She talked about, the sisters and, kind of with their mom's encouragement. I had met one of the sisters who became the executive director for TAT at an industry conference probably 16 years ago. So I know I'm kind of dating myself, but it was very early on with Truckers Against Trafficking. And it was just something that really struck me on like, wow, this is a really critical and eye-opening piece of, just the reality of the business that I didn't know. And, for me, you hear human trafficking, you immediately think like third world country. You don't think that the United States is the number one business for human trafficking, which is just disturbing. So we kind of were pretty early on, got exposed to Truckers Against Trafficking, and we got a little bit of traction on, hey, this would be a really cool thing for us. And over the years, I remember, rolling it out again, when I went back into, it was 2015, sharing it with the drivers in Dallas and Irving. And just like once everything, I think everybody got educated on just what was going on and the risks and how they could get involved, they were all in. Like, our drivers are just amazing. And it gave them, something else to get involved with, if the community, or have a sense of purpose outside of just like their day job while they were out on the road. And so, like with a lot of corporate initiatives, we lost a little bit of traction because we didn't have a leader or an owner who really, just took the program and just ran with it until a few years ago. We were actually attending a Women in Trucking conference, and we had a pretty big attendee list of all levels of the organization across, Frito-Lay, and a group of my female leaders got exposed to Truckers Against Trafficking for the first time, and they were fired up. They were all in, and they said, Mari, can we do something with this? And I said, absolutely. You got to go big or go home, right? Like, we're not going to be half in this time, because I had already kind of done that throughout the year, was like, we're either in or we're out. Like, we're going to go all in, or we're not going to just commit to being a partner. And so I give, Vanessa Gauchi, it was, one of the leaders who has really led this effort over the last few years. And if you know Vanessa, she's very determined and passionate also. And it's been really great to see, so we have now expanded across both food and beverage to get the word out. Because, across PepsiCo, there's a lot of drivers out there. There's a lot of just corporate employees that travel as well. So we've expanded that. We've been able to train over 4,200 associates the last couple years. And the more just you keep raising the awareness and sharing, some of the horror stories and the examples and just the billions of dollars that these people are making selling people. It's just disheartening that it's happening. And so for us to be able to lean in, also, just super proud of PepsiCo, because we already had like a global code of conduct and a global human rights policy. And so we were able to kind of use PepsiCo's global human rights policy, which prohibits the use of all forms of forced labor, including indentured labor, bonded labor, slave labor, any form of human trafficking. So we were able to get a lot of support we actually have a human rights team within PepsiCo. And so they've been really helping us as well, just amplify the message and get it across, not just in terms of our drivers. Whereas I feel like, from a transportation standpoint, we kind of own it because it's Truckers Against Trafficking, but just, and as you've talked kind of on previous episodes, having that corporate buy-in and that corporate, leadership is so important. You have to have that sponsorship. And that's where I feel like at least I'm able to kind of now fill that role of being more of the sponsor and the advocate, and to make sure that we've got the right levels in the organization that are aware and of what the work we're doing. But then you've also got, the leaders, boots on the ground, that are able to then take the message and then, roll out the training, roll out the communication, and have, the campaigns. And so we've definitely found you need both sides of that for a partnership like this with Truckers Against Trafficking to be successful.
Yeah, that's great. Perfect. Great job. And I think there's so much work yet to still be done. And I think you guys are on the right track. Like I said, getting excited about it and knowing that you can make a difference, I think is huge. And we have that responsibility out here on the road, on the foot.
I agree.
Say going in, making those sales orders or whatever they have to do too. There's people that people don't know are working for PepsiCo, merchandisers, they're out there too. So I mean, that's huge. Any stories that you have to share? Maybe any moments that you saw, maybe the firsthand impact of TAT work?
There's a few. We've had a few drivers who have been able to share, experiences. And I think that's the biggest thing is you kind of go with your gut a little bit on, like, if something doesn't seem right or feel right or look right, it's probably not, but it's okay if you're wrong. And I think being able to have, whether it's the TAT app or the phone number to call helps remove that burden for the driver on just, you let local law enforcement handle it. Your job is really just to be the eyes and the ears. But one of the more recent examples that one of our associates shared after being trained and going through some of just the signs and what to look for was actually at a local community park, little playground with their own children. And, two, vans, probably more SUVs, right, that had blacked out windows pulled up to the parking lot, and like three men got out of the vehicles, and there were probably 7 or 8 young children that they took to the playground, which at least, they got them outside and got them to the playground. But, after kind of being aware, looked at, just the clothes the kids were wearing, and they looked unkept, right? They looked like they hadn't been bathed and, hair washed, and actually saw some stains on their pants. And kind of drew some red flags on, this doesn't really look right. Like, not to say that dads can't take their kids to the park, but there were no moms, no women anywhere, just a bunch of kids. And just the circumstances they just didn't look right. And so they used the app and were able to report. Given since the situation was occurring live, they recommended, getting, local law enforcement involved. And they did. And it turned out, later that day, there was, the news that there was a bust on some human trafficking in that area. So kind of, if you see something, say something example. And it's just scary. Like I said, it can happen anywhere. It can happen in your backyard, a lot of misconceptions, or it's, certain socioeconomic, places, but it can happen in any neighborhood, regardless of income. It's just, you've just got to be, aware of what to look for.
Yeah. Scary stuff when you think about it,
it's very scary.
Wow.
That's right.
So the road recognition, I mean, you received significant industry recognition, including being the finalist of the 2022 Influential Woman in Trucking Award. So what does that recognition mean for you personally?
I appreciate you bringing that up. And honestly, for me, it means more to my team, that we were able to, be recognized as, just showcase all the work. But it was honor. Like, it's such an honor to even been nominated, and I already felt like I won, right? And I'm a pretty competitive person, but you have to know what game you're playing, right? Like, I'm not playing to be the best. I'm playing to help move things forward and not be the last of anything. So I think that part was neat. But for me personally, what meant the most to me was I had my daughter there. And I give Lindsay Trent, who was also one of the finalists, we had a call before, and she mentioned she was going to bring her teenage daughter. And I thought, oh my gosh, that's a great idea. I hadn't even thought about it. And she said, it's just important for her to see, how many women and the recognition. And so I was like, you know what, that's a great idea. I was local, and my daughter was in 5th grade at the time. And so I had asked her if she wanted to go. And it kind of a funny side story. I asked my son also, who was in 3rd grade, and he was like, Mom, like, I have a math test. So he's like, I don't want to miss my math. And I was like, it's okay, buddy. So 3rd grade math was definitely very important for him. And it was fine. I didn't want to make him go, but at least wanted to make sure he was included. But what I think for me, why this was so meaningful is there's some really cool pictures out there of all of us on stage, and Lindsay and I both had our daughters up there with us. But a few weeks before that, my daughter, who's an introvert, by the way, decided she was going to run for student council. And so I asked her if she knew anything about student council, about any of the roles, and she did not. So we went through all of the different roles, responsibilities, and what exactly she wanted to be running for. And she said, I want to be president. I was like, all right, this is my girl, right? Like, she just went to the top. She wants to be the president. So she put her campaign together. She put all this stuff, and she did a great job. She's very creative, very artistic. So what she put together was fantastic about why, she should be president and why she was running and all the things she was going to go do. And so when it came day, of the voting, I picked her up from school that day, and she came out of school just skipping, shoulders back, head up, big smile on her face. And I'm like, oh my gosh, this child just won. And so I asked her, I said, well, how did it go? And she goes, I didn't win, which kind of surprised me, right? Given her body language, I was a little surprised. And so I said, oh, and I was kind of wondering, like, okay. She said, but my friend Gina won, and I'm so excited for Gina. She's going to do a great job. And I told her that, I will help, and just to let me know however I can help her. And I got to tell you, like, as a parent, I have never been so proud. And I told her, I'm kind of probably getting a little choked up now. I told her that I was more proud of how she supported her friend Gina and how she leaned in and still wanted to contribute to the school, to the cause, than it was about her. And that I was so proud of her for not like taking that as a negative thing about her, right? This didn't take anything away from my daughter. It didn't mean that she wasn't, capable or as smart or as big of a leader. It didn't take anything away from her. and that she was still able to, hold up her friend Gina. And I was just so proud. So knowing that I had just given her this big speech about how strong women support other strong women, and you've got to be an ally and an advocate, and it's not a competition. It's not a competition against other women, and we have to help raise each other up, and it's going to make everybody better, everybody stronger. So when I was standing on that stage and the four of us, and they were getting ready to announce the winner, I was praying that they didn't call my name. I was like, please don't call my name. Please don't call my name, because I wanted her to see me in the same environment where I didn't win the finalist, and I didn't have to, right? I didn't need to be, because I already had won. And I was so proud. Actually, it was Trina from UPS who was the winner that year. And I jumped up and I gave her a big hug and pulled all of the women together. And just, that for me was just such a great moment where I could at least, show my daughter the same thing. So to me, and I appreciate you asking, because most people wouldn't know that story. So when you go out there and you see the picture of all of us with our, up on stage, and the two of us have our daughters there, like for me, that was probably more of the defining moment as a mom and as a parent, that I got to model all the things that I just, were so proud of my daughter for doing.
I mean, that's huge. That's what a great moment to share together as a family, and also as accomplishment as women. I mean, that's huge. And like I said, being a daughter dad, I mean, that's huge, man. To see your daughter stand up for someone else and know that they don't have to be the main attention. Just them being strong for someone else is going to help so many people see that it's okay to give. Mm-hmm. They say there's more happiness in giving than there is receiving. So
I would agree with that.
Right there from a young one. Man, a call for action. Maybe just Mari, it's been an incredible conversation. I know our listeners are going to definitely take away a lot of gems from it. So for listeners who get involved with initiatives like Women in Trucking and Truckers Against Trafficking, the TATS, where should they start? Or people maybe at PepsiCo that are listening, saying, hey, I'm a part of that great movement. What are some specific programs that PepsiCo would like for people or employees to look into?
Yeah, I think it's a great question. I would say, just get involved. Just go look into you can go to the Truckers Against Trafficking website. Obviously, from an internal standpoint, we've got a lot of information and training available, but I would just just advocate, just get involved, do the training, just learn, right? Like there's always something that we can continue to just learn and just, be able to pay some of that stuff forward. And just with all of it, I would say if there's something that you're interested and passionate about, or you want to mentor, you want to help people along, just get involved. And I think you use the word like call to action, just like that's to me is like, just do something, right? Just take one step forward, and it'll be interesting to see kind of how many steps or how you can kind of run from there. But the hardest part sometimes is just taking that first step. So just take the first step, go do the training, go learn more about it. And I think when, you start to see some of the statistics and how this, the trafficking industry is just continuing to grow, like we have got to do more to just, raise visibility. And I think it was also great that it sounds like pretty big, like, okay, well, what do I do? Well, one of the other advices that I think she gave was like anywhere that there is vulnerabilities, that's usually the target. So you can help, whether it's, food insecurities or volunteering at a food bank, like there's any action I think is going to help move this cause forward. So whether, big or small, just, I would encourage everybody just to go do something.
You got a good recall. That's good. Yeah. Thank you, Mari. Taking that time out of your day. I know you're busy. Share your story, your insights, and also the work that you're involved in, and taking the bull by the horns of being that positive energy and that making a positive impact in the trucking industry. I think it is inspiring to see leaders like yourself make a real impact, and not just in your organization, but across the entire industry for trucking. And then so many other industries can also learn from that as well, because trucking moves everything, So For everyone listening today, it's definitely been an enjoyable episode to be a part of with Mari. Be sure to subscribe, share with a friend, leave a review, and that helps us bring this great conversations to you like this one here. So check out Truckers Against Trafficking and Women in Trucking. That is a great associations to be a part of also, and show your support for them. Supporting these truly make a difference for so many people. So thank you so much for being on the show, Mari.
Awesome. Thanks so much for having me, and keep up the great work.
Until next time, keep it safe, keep moving, and always Fast Delivered.
Are you a trucker looking for a safe and reliable place to park? Look no further than Truck Parking Club. With locations across the country, we've got the perfect spot waiting for you, whether it's daily or long-term parking. And right now, use promo code DELIVERED at checkout for an exclusive discount. Reserve your spot today at truckparkingclub.com and drive stress-free, knowing your parking is covered.